those of you in the UK and in the West may have started to notice a bit of a crunch going on with prices to do with oil, gas, electricity, anything that you can think of. The prices are starting to go up. I, for one, know that this is hitting me particularly hard, being someone who drives. Fuel prices, especially diesel prices in the UK, are absolutely skyrocketing at the moment. And there are a number of reasons for that. Obviously, the one we'll examine first is the issues going on with exporting oil and gas from Russia. And the other one, which we'll be focusing on that's much more domestic, is going to be the net zero goals that our government are aiming towards for net zero emissions by, I believe, 2050, isn't it? Which is something that's been pushed by Boris Johnson for quite a while now. But let's get into what exactly I'm talking about and why this is happening. So the most recent surge in prices is covered in this BBC News article talking about oil prices rise again as buyers shun Russian crude oil. And I'm sure you're all aware of the fact that there are a number of sanctions being placed on Russia at the moment, which is stopping exports and imports going over to that country. So the cost of oil surged on Wednesday. Traders snapped up non-Russian oil, increasing the chance of further price rises at UK forecourts. Brent crude, which is the global benchmark for oil prices, passed $113 a barrel, its highest level since 2014. And don't worry, it has in fact gone up since then, and I'll be showing you the figures in a moment. Traders are struggling to sell Russian oil, even at a discount, because of the new difficulties in shipping and payments amid its invasion of Ukraine. Gas prices also doubled, which could feed through to energy bills. Almost 70% of Russian crude oil exports do not have a buyer, according to UK-based research consultancy Energy Aspects. And on Tuesday, oil trader Trafigura offered a cargo load of Russian crude oil at a record discount of $18.60 per barrel below the market rate for Brent, but could not find a buyer willing to take the risk. So all of this seems to be based on one thing, which is that it seems that we are very dependent, or at least parts of the European Union are very, very dependent on Russian oil and Russian gas. And obviously all of these sanctions are giving it quite a hit. And Rita Sen, its founding partner, told the BBC World Service that buyers are concerned that they could run afoul of Western sanctions, and lawyers are pouring through the language of the new rule. So this is putting off people who could be buying this and selling it for cheaper prices and saying, well, I don't know if I'm going to be hit legally with these sanctions, so I'm just not going to risk it at all, and we're all having to front the bill as a result of that. The RAC said that if the higher oil price is sustained, the cost of filling up a car in the UK will increase with it. The sudden $10 jump in the oil price is likely to take the average price of petrol towards 155p a litre and diesel to 160 pence, particularly as it's looking like this price isn't just a market blip caused by the US and allies deciding to dip into the strategic oil reserve. And my experiences over this past weekend can absolutely confirm, yes, diesel prices have hit 160 pence per litre, and in some places are going over that, especially if you're going on the motorway service stations. It's absolutely ridiculous. Not that they're known as the best value for money in the first place, but it's not looking good if you're driving. And I'm thinking about getting myself a bicycle or something so that I don't have to drive so much and rely on public transport. Household gas and electricity bills are also set to rise after the annual energy price cap increases to £1,971 in April. But the rise in wholesale prices amid the war in Ukraine may mean the price cap ratchets up to £3,000 by the end of the year, according to one energy analyst. Wholesale prices might make up between 40 to 50% of household bills, said independent energy analyst David Cox. If these high prices stay around 400p per therm, we may see the price cap head closer to £3,000 a year, which is terrifying. Energy analysts at Cornwall Insights also predicted a jump at the energy price cap in October, based on turmoil in the European wholesale gas prices, to over £2,900. So no matter which way you look at it, it's not looking great.
No, it's going to be so it's going to be pretty terrible. And
no, I think that deserves a bloody. We need to express our Britishness here. It's going to be bloody awful.
Right. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter, particularly celebrities, Jack Marks and the usual lot, saying, guys, we can afford to have a little bit of a squeeze so that we can stick it to Putin. It's like, this reminds me of the old meme, some of you may freeze to death, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Yeah, that's the Hassan Piker situation of I can participate in society while also being the one living, the dragon hoarding my gold in a castle. You guys have to foot the bill. It's very easy to be able to say all of these things when you've got enough wealth behind you to absorb the costs.
Yeah.
But for anybody on the ground, such as myself or many of you watching, these kinds of prices are not the sorts of things that we are looking forward to, or even that many of us will be able to handle. If we can find spots in our budget where we're able to actually make up these differences in prices.
I also have to wonder, for people who are working that is one thing, but people who are retired and living off pensions, do their pension allowances really handle this kind of price jump?
That's a good point. You know, that's a very good point. Who knows if they'll be able to handle it? But
it'd be great if we had a strategic reserve of natural gas or something to deal with this, wouldn't it?
It would. I've not actually got anything regarding that, but from what you were telling me...
I learned recently that apparently Theresa May sold the country's entire strategic reserve of natural gas because she'd decided that we live in a buy-on-demand economy now.
Yes, because if I'm in...
Should have gone to Specsavers.
If I'm in the desert with my last glass of water, I will happily sell it for that pretty penny because it's a buy-on-demand economy, I suppose. But yeah, so it's not great, and whether you can afford it or not, even if you do find a space in your budget, you can be guaranteed that because of the money that you're going to be spending extra on that, the rest of your quality of life might have to take a bit of a dip as a result of it. And this isn't to mention as well that the Tesco meal deal price has gone up 50 pence as well, so that's putting even more of a squeeze and crunch on me. But let's take a look at the graphs that are showing the fluctuating prices. With oil is easily the most fluctuating. Here you can see that we are reaching, I think it's about $124 per barrel currently, which is almost as high, it's reached beyond any peak beyond 2008, which I believe hit to about $158 a barrel. So we're getting to 08 depression, recession kind of levels, which is not looking very good. Happily, this website also includes little details at the top about why they might be fluctuating so much currently. So US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said Sunday in the US and its allies are considering banning Russian oil and natural gas imports in an effort to ramp up sanctions against Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. So to fight Russia, you and I will all have to go bankrupt. Thank you very much for that. Let's take a look at gas prices as well. Gas prices, you can see, for the past 25 years, relatively stable up until sometime last year. And this is one thing that you'll have to notice as well. The actual spikes seem to have gone up quite rapidly in the past few days, yes, but there was signs of rising prices before then, which obviously cannot necessarily be purely due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict currently. But it was pretty stable up until about 2020, 2021, and then all of a sudden it just completely skyrockets. So now...
What happened at the beginning of last year, 2021? What happened in America? Oh, we got a new president, didn't we?
Oh, yeah, we did get a new president, and he was... shutting down a few things like pipelines and other such things as well, wasn't he? I wonder if that would have anything to do with it. And finally, let's take a look at the price of coal, which is also absolutely spiked. Its price per ton has gone to $418, whereas before it was once again relatively stable until some point between 2020 and 2021 where it started to go up.
Well, with prices like that, we ought to get the Welsh back in the mines, I'm just saying.
Yeah, we really should. We could make a killing right now.
Yeah, probably in more ways than one, though.
Newcastle...
Don't flame us, Welsh.
Yeah, of course. I'm northern, so my people would be very happy to hear of the mines reopening and the amount of money they could all make from it. But yeah, so we've got another massive spike, and it says here, the Newcastle coal futures topped a new record high of $430 per tonne amid the conflict in Ukraine. Recent sanctions on Russia, such as restricting access to European ports, triggered a rush in utilities in Asia and Europe to find alternative suppliers, such as Australia. And it seems that rush to find alternative suppliers may not have been massively successful, or perhaps they just don't have the supply to meet the demand, hence why the price is absolutely exploding right now. And let's take a look at why it might be that Russia in particular has such a big effect globally on the prices of these things. So because I don't claim to be any kind of expert on this. So if I do get any of these statistics wrong or I misinterpret some things, please let me know down in the comments below. It will only help me to be able to learn more about this situation. So Russia's main trading partners are non-CIS countries, which makes up 86.9% of their exports.
What does that mean, non-CIS?
I don't know, actually. So you might want to, if you want to check that out. But so the top 5 are China, who have a trade turnover of $112 billion. Germany at number 2. What does CIS?
I thought so. Commonwealth of Independent States, which is essentially the post-Soviet bloc countries.
Okay, yeah. Germany obviously makes up number 2 with $46.1 billion. Netherlands, then the US, and then Turkey. And what is it that Russia is mainly supplying those countries with? Well, if you scroll down again, you can see that the top 6 Russian exports by product value, number 1 topping out is fuel and energy, making up 53.8% of all of their exports to these countries, which is vastly outshines anything else that they are exporting. So for whatever reason, we have become incredibly dependent, or at least certain Western countries and China have become very dependent on Russia for these kinds of fuels and energies. And people like Michael Schellenberger have got a lot to say about this. Michael Schellenberger is an author who has written books like Apocalypse Never, recently came out with one called San Francisco, talking about cities. And he's been very interesting discussing all of this. I think if you scroll up, I might have got the wrong link for this one, John. Scroll up again. Oh, God, I might have got the wrong one in here, actually. Yeah, scroll up a bit further. Yes, here we go. Sorry, I got the wrong link in there. So he's talking here about people think that Europe depends on Russia for energy because it lacks its own. But 15 years ago, as seen in this graph, Europe exported more natural gas than Russia does today. Now, Russia exports 3 times more gas than Europe produces. Why? Because of climate activists, partly funded by Russia, blocking fracking, which from all the other information that you can find in this thread, if you click on the link, he does talk about, I think Russia put funding it with $95 million worth of funding into these sorts of climate things, climate initiatives. So that is quite spectacular. Before, it seems that if this had happened years and years ago, we would not be in the situation where we're having to worry about putting food on our plates at the end of the week, as we are now. And he makes another point here where he talks about, go to the next one if you wouldn't mind, John. Oh, to the next link. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Yep, thank you. That was the original. I must have swapped them around. Apologies, folks out there. But yeah, he basically just talks about how Russia's invasion of Ukraine could have been deterred had Putin feared that Europe would stop buying his oil, gas, and coal. But Putin knew that Europe and the US couldn't stop buying Russia's fuel without severe shortages and triggering a recession. Now, it does seem like, even despite that, we are sanctioning them. We are potentially pulling out of getting all of this oil, gas, and coal. But as said, we are going to be suffering some severe shortages and massive, massive hikes in prices, as I've already experienced. So had this not happened originally, it might have been a situation where Putin may have thought twice, obviously sort of putting aside any of the other considerations like you've talked about in your destabilizing Ukraine video. It is interesting to consider, if we hadn't been so dependent, would he have felt confident enough to be able to pull this off?
And it's worth pointing out that fracking is just one aspect of our energy policy. And specifically, the debate around fracking seems to centre around fracking on land. That you can also frack under the sea, although it's more expensive, of course. But yeah, our general refusal to equip ourselves with fossil fuel reserves looks rather short-sighted right now.
I would absolutely agree. And it is, of course, all in the push for the net zero initiative, which many people have noticed seemed to, before all this happened, be starting to slowly rise prices, but even before Russia was getting so involved in Ukraine. And Nigel Farage has decided to come out and say we need a referendum on the net zero madness. So he's launched a new campaign with Richard Tice called Power Not Poverty, basically just making the point that we should probably be building up our own power reserves and becoming more energy independent so that we're not impoverishing our own citizens for the sake of punishing Russia or anybody else, or just safeguarding ourselves themselves for the future in case any other situations like this happen again. And he's put a big thing in the Daily Mail talking about the Sunday Mail. I'll read some of the article and then read a little bit of his letter that he's done as well. So Britain Means Business, which I think was the original name for it, which is now Power Not Poverty, will call for the abandonment of the flagship green policy. Ex-Brexit leader says that the political class in Westminster has taken the country down a ruinous path, something that I'm not exactly going to be disagreeing with. He established movement with Leave Means Leave co-founder Richard Tice. This will call for the abandonment of the flagship green policy, which experts claim could cost £1.3 trillion.
Probably more.
Probably more. In fact, almost guaranteed more, because if the government says it's going to cost one thing, take that number and triple it. And remember, that's your money that it'll be doing, that it'll be using to pay for it. Mr. Farage says that the political class in Westminster has taken the country down a ruinous path by committing to the net zero target without any public debate being held.
Yeah, isn't that curious?
I mean, the government takes a lot of major decisions that affect all of us without ever actually putting it forward to the public.
No, they just seem to talk to a few lushers and a few activist groups, and then they decide their policy.
I think lushes is probably an excellent term for these kinds of people. He writes, without any debate, our energy bills have been loaded with green subsidies. Our businesses have been disadvantaged, yet our leaders seem happy to outsource industrial production just as long as they can say it reduces Britain's CO2 emissions. We will campaign for the 5% VAT on energy bills to be removed. Green subsidies are shoveled straight into the bank accounts of rich landowners, wealthy investors, and foreign-owned conglomerates who own much of the renewable energy sector. And mentioning Schellenberger, I've been flicking through a little bit of Apocalypse Never, his book, and he talks a lot about how all of the green initiatives seem to be pushed by large fossil fuel companies. For instance, the move to natural gases over coal was originally opposed mainly by coal companies who knew that if they went onto natural gas, they would be losing out on a massive share of profits that they could be getting from it, which is one of the major problems that you can get with lobbying. His views have found an echo in the cabinet, with Chancellor Rishi Sunak expressing his concerns to the Prime Minister about the cost of net zero, which might be one of the only sensible things I've heard about Rishi Sunak in recent years.
Yes, but then Rishi Sunak was grilled on it by Andrew Neil, of all people, right at the start of GB News.
That would make sense.
Andrew Neil was the only person in the entire media establishment who asked Rishi how much is it going to cost, and he had no answer because he was just prepared for a media circus where the BBC and ITV and so on would be asking him, so why can't you get to net zero faster then? Yes,
whereas the more practical questions always get left at the wayside when it comes to such things that I would say...
He was completely unprepared to answer that question.
I would say a lot of the climate debate has become very ideological rather than based in facts.
It's a religious argument. It's not a scientific argument, even if you can argue there's a good scientific case for climate change. Even despite that, the sort of alarmism, the panic, the desperation to go to net zero, whatever that means, that's a religious drive, I think.
Yes, it's like the old-fashioned doomsayers brought into the 21st century. In fact, I would say it's exactly that. The Independent Office for Budget Responsibility has calculated the cost of making buildings carbon neutral at £400 billion, while the bill for vehicles would be £330 billion, because part of the initiative is to make all vehicles carbon neutral as well, as far as I can tell, in addition to the £500 billion needed to clean up power generation and a further £46 billion for industry. So just sprinkle an extra £46 billion on there. And this all sounds like money that we're all more than happy to pay and all decided collectively and agreed to pay, right? No. Of course not.
That would happen in a democracy, Harry.
No, I'm sorry, I forgot that we're currently living in these. Well, what would it even be?
I don't know at this point.
The glorious nation of England. I don't know. After energy savings across the economy, this would leave a £400 billion bill for the Treasury. Before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, economists had forecast that inflation would peak at 7% per year this year. Now they fear that even without extra support, the disruption to global supply chains caused by the conflict could push it to 9%, or even into double figures. So great, we're being asked to pay more and our money is worth less. Wonderful. And Farage in this writes himself, if you want to scroll down, because I think his letter is further into this article. Yes, here it is. Consider this. There are vast reserves of shale gas in Lancashire and Yorkshire, yet Even with the world in such a fragile state, the government prefers to import natural gas instead. And of course, they also push things like wind farms, which when you actually look into it, take up about 400 times more space than a natural gas factory would, for instance. Indeed, there are 2 shipments from Russia docking at a Kent port this weekend, yet importing gas in tankers creates substantially more CO2. This is cross-party campaign, and it will have considerable support from businesses. To truly succeed, though, we need to hear from the public. We intend to provide people with the means to make their voices heard in this most vital debate. Be in no doubt, this argument matters to every man, woman and child in Britain. It is not fair that under net zero, the elderly will die colder, poorer and sooner, and it is not fair that the young will be burdened with higher costs, fewer jobs, and less money. Common sense must be allowed to prevail, which honestly I think is a good start on all of this. It's a strong starting point to put it towards people. Whether this actually will go ahead or not is...
whether we get the referendum, that will take a lot of effort.
It will take a lot of effort, possibly a long time.
The campaign will have some momentum, though, because it is an issue that affects everyone.
Hopefully it will have some effect and also raise a bit more awareness to the fact that these supposedly altruistic and virtuous campaigns often just come at the expense of the general public for the sake of pushing what the elites want, their agendas. And just as a reference to some of the stuff that they were talking about in there, talking about the fact that there are lots of subsidies put on your electricity bill, let's see a breakdown of your energy bills provided by Ofgem. I believe, John, you've got some figures up for this. If you want to go to the first figure. So we've got direct costs, and you can see there's quite a sizable chunk of your electricity bill dedicated purely to environmental and social obligation costs.
That's about a quarter, isn't it?
It is, in fact, a quarter. If we skip along, 25.48% of your electricity bill each month is going to environmental and social obligation costs, which basically just means it's funding the government's wacky net zero policies.
So, again, a stealth tax.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. It's another stealth tax, like inflation is a stealth tax, like everything else.
So if our bills do go up to £3,000 a year, then that means you'll be paying £750 a year in stealth tax for net zero.
Yes, it absolutely does. Which doesn't sound like something that I want to be doing, but I guess I don't get a say in this, do I? And of course, the typical lushies, as you would say, have come out to let it be known that they are furious that Nigel Farage wants to give the people the power to determine their own future and their own fate.
A man of the people to come and tell us how to behave.
Hugh Grant tells Nigel Farage to go F yourself over net zero referendum campaign, because Hugh Grant, as we all know, is a friend of the people. He is a man who knows what it's like to suffer with high bills, massive increases in the cost of living.
He's an environmentally conscious man as well.
Yeah, and if we move along, we can see the struggles that he has to go through on a day-to-day basis on his private jet, his multiple fast Italian supercars, which I'm sure are very carbon neutral and don't guzzle much gas at all. But it's, once again, very easy to say all of this when you already have enough money to absorb the costs, isn't it? And we've got other controversy from climate nutters. We've got an article from The National talking about the announcement was met with furious backlash, with many pointing out that the plan may be counter to the goal of weaning the UK off Russian oil and gas, even though it's explicitly, if you read what Farage is saying, to get us off of dependency on Russian oil and gas by having our own and that we can be independent on. One person wrote, the curious thing about Nigel Farage is even when something has nothing to do with Brexit, because you've got to throw that old chestnut in there, his campaigns always seem to tally with Russia's interests.
Here I have to stop you there and point out the National's front cover, which I believe was today.
Oh, yeah.
You got that in here?
I've not got that in there, no.
There's a big picture of a British nuclear submarine saying we have to scrap Trident. Because nuclear
that one, I have
don't
seen
work.
that
That's
one,
from
yes.
this paper.
Oh my God, what absolute nutters.
And yet,
see, there's never been a nuclear war, so we obviously just don't need nuclear deterrent.
Right, and then they have the cheek to accuse Farage of having his interests tally with Russia's
oh
interests.
My God, yeah, John, get that up for us. Yeah, there we go. Laughs in Russian. SNP chief, Trident must go. Oh my goodness gracious me, what on earth? And they go on. Here in mists of war, where Russia's only trump card is its oil, Farage launches a campaign to step up our consumption of oil. And if we have no nukes, and they have lots of nukes. What do you think that says for whether we have to bow to Russia's interests or not?
And I love the way they just swap the word production of oil to consumption of oil.
Yeah,
So slippery.
very, very sneaky. But thankfully, there are people with large influences, along with Nigel Farage, coming out and starting to speak some common sense. In fact, like people like Michael Schellenberger, some of the premier advocates for environmentalism. Elon Musk, in the past, has been very, very focused on electricity, renewable energy.
CEO of Tesla, makes electric cars.
Yep. Even he has come out and said, hate to say it, but we do need to increase oil and gas output immediately. Extraordinary times demand extraordinary measures. Move along. And he said, obviously, this would negatively affect Tesla, but sustainable energy solutions simply cannot react instantaneously to make up for Russian oil and gas imports. Excellent points. And then he also said, move along again, hopefully it's now extremely obvious that Europe should restart dormant nuclear power stations and increase the power output of existing ones. This is critical to national and international security. And he follows that up with as well, for those who mistakenly think there is a radiation risk, pick what you think is the worst location, I'll travel there and eat locally grown food on TV.
North Korea.
Did this in Japan many years ago, shortly after Fukushima. Radiation risk is much lower than most people believe. Elon Musk once again proving that he would make a much better leader for most of the Western countries than our current Western leaders, at least in terms when it comes to the fact that he seems to actually understand what it is that he's talking about on a practical level. He may not like it, but we know that these renewable energies cannot adjust themselves in the same way that the pre-existing infrastructure that we've already got can, if we were to become more independent with our own energy.
Absolutely.
And that's about all I've got to that. If you are in support of Nigel Farage and his referendum, as I am, hopefully we can make some inroads with all of that.
Yeah.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this premium podcast between Carl and Thomas on the origins of the Dark Enlightenment. Very spicy indeed. And if you want to follow Carl, you can also follow him at Getter at Carl Benjamin. Thank you and goodbye.